just want to say thank you to Dr. Vaishali and Dr. Fatke for inviting me all the way from South Africa. It's always a pleasure to get away from South Africa and visit India. This is going to be a tough talk because it's quite a diverse crowd here, and some of you have heard this already, or some of it already. But I'll try and cater to all the different minds here to leave you with a bit of a taster of what I'm talking about. So, as has been mentioned, I am an endocrinologist by profession, but I've been delving into philosophy for almost 20 years. And I'll tell you what I mean by philosophy in a second. It's an important place to go to, I think, as a human being, because everybody's sitting here today because one desire brought you here, right? And that desire is the desire for knowledge, actually. And different reasons. Knowledge that you want to enhance your own expertise, knowledge because you want to help others. And in finding that knowledge, there's a satisfaction for you, actually. So the actual reason you came here is you're also seeking happiness, but you're seeking it through knowledge, interestingly. Others may find it through wealth, money, power, name, fame, fashion, Bollywood, whatever it is, right? So whatever people do in life, whatever it looks like, there's one root that we're all seeking, one thing we're all seeking. And it has different synonyms: peace, bliss, happiness, contentment, fullness. That's what we're looking for. Until we get that, we're feeling empty. And not knowing where to find it, we're creating the modern pandemics that we call lifestyle diseases, which are mainly mind-driven. So I'm going to use a lot of Western scholars, interestingly, although I come to India for my study. And the Eastern scholars are the ones that have really enhanced my understanding. But it's to show you, to whet the appetite of this august scientific crowd, that any Western science or philosophy that's worth its weight in gold is actually tainted by Eastern philosophy first. Remember that. The knowledge comes from here. So Claude Bernard was the man who coined the word milieu interior, the internal milieu, which is homeostasis. Now, homeostasis is maintained with a comfortable stretch. If you go to a high altitude, there's an adaptation. If it's hot, your body adapts. If it's cold, your body adapts. And it happens without your conscious control, as long as you do things slowly. But the key words here is that the higher species, the human being, with the dilemma of choice, right? We're the only species with the dilemma of choice. Remember, a lion will not be a vegetarian. When there's no meat around, that it's going to die. A lamb cannot be a carnivore, it's a vegetarian. So the other species seem to be protected by nature. They don't overeat, they don't undereat. If you go to a national park, you don't see the issues we see with human beings today, isn't it? So nature, like the switch trips, they'll fight to get the first piece of food, but the minute they're full, they walk away and leave it, isn't it? The animals will fight to get the food, they're full, they walk away. Humans, if there's one plate of food and we're all hungry, you have the capacity to say you first. We won't fight, you see? But in eating it, once we're full, if we relish the experience, we'll still go back for more, isn't it? These are all the difference between the species. So the question becomes then, we can't say that nature doesn't protect the human. The nature has protected the human by giving us something else. It's called the intellect, to govern the mind, or we call in India buddhi. Buddhi is not intelligence, book knowledge. It's the ability to think properly. Last year at MBM we spoke about the gyro, an internal app that regulates your thinking, you see? And that's the thing that needs to be developed. So in my introduction, what I'm saying is this wise relationship to the environment is not about do's and don'ts. It's not a prescription. It is an intuitive, fresh approach to looking at a situation as it is in the moment. Bruce Lee used to say, when you water in a cup, become the cup. You mold to the environment. And that ability, that potential is a human potential, which I put to you that the entire world has forgotten. Very few people know this. And the knowledge on how to develop that is not available anywhere, not in any university. You will find it in this country, but it's ingrained. You got to bring it out of it, you see? And that's what we mean by wise relationship. So when you got that wise relationship, this homeostasis will maintain itself. You stay young, right? You don't age. So This is what we're talking about, knowledge. Now, knowledge, first of all, is taken, not given. Those of us that are seekers of knowledge, there's a big thing in the West today. Everybody wants a PhD, isn't it? And they feel like it must be given to them, isn't it? The teachers must be of a certain caliber, there's entitlement to education, whereas real knowledge, especially as it was taught in India, China, Japan, the Eastern countries, was the disciple goes with activity, with humility, with reverence, wanting the knowledge, and not selfishly. He wants the knowledge to express in art, not to earn, not for name and fame. It was always unselfish. I remember when I met my teacher, my guru, I asked him about his knowledge, and he asked me, "Are you studying it?" And I said, "I'm listening to audiobooks in the car in traffic." And he says, "Idiot." And gurus are cynical, they teach you with a bit of humor as well. He said, "This knowledge was the highest knowledge known to man, and students would fight animals in the jungles of the Himalayas to find a teacher to get it. And you listening to it in an audiobook in the car, you should give it the reverence it deserves." And since then, 13 years ago, I've been studying at 4 to 6 in the morning, Monday to Sunday, 2 hours a day. But I stopped studying all the other stuff, the PhD stuff. The point is that knowledge is taken, is not given. So if we really want knowledge, we've got to put in a huge effort, is the first point. And then knowledge is not just given through reading or by someone telling you. There's different forms of cognition, you see, and we've forgotten these here. The scientific approach in modern times is not wrong. It's wonderful, it is evidence-based approach. But I'll put it to you as someone with an opinion on things, that we've become too lopsided, that we're so heavily dependent on evidence, right? I'm very popular. You okay?
Yes.
Check. So we become so dependent on evidence that we can't use that intuitive capability anymore. Like I was saying, how do we choose what we eat? How do we know when to stop? So the same thing is happening in medicine and science, that the Western approach has taken us to this point that without evidence, there's almost an inertia to act. It's actually scary in the world right now. If I say, why don't you sit down for 5 minutes and just breathe and relax before we proceed? Where's the evidence for that? You see what I'm saying? You can't, there's inertia now. Right? Common sense is completely gone. So my point is, I think it's important to talk about other forms of evidence. So direct perception is evidence-based medicine. You measure in a scientific lab, you do a clinical trial, you get a statistical p-value, hazard ratio, absolute risk, all of that. That's direct perception through using your senses. But then there's also inference. Sometimes in a clinical situation where there's smoke, there's going to be fire. The patient's BMI is 35, there's probably going to be dyslipidemia, hypertension. You see what I'm saying? Now you need to go quote every journal in. We had the Google patient, which was a tough patient. Now we got the AI patient. I've researched. I know more than you. What did you come to me for, right? So inference is where there's smoke, there's going to be fire. It's common sense. Comparison is used a lot in Eastern education systems. The Zen koans, if you look at the Atma Bodha, the Bhaja Govindam, everything is like something. It's a comparison. So if I say Shivaji Maharaj was like a tiger, I don't mean he had a tail and stripes and all of that. He was courageous, you see. Now, that type of knowledge you get through comparison. And tradition is most important, where you go to revered teachers. But you don't just choose your teacher blindly. You see whether he's living the truth, and through his own living it, whether he's capable. See, anyone that's higher than you can teach you anything lower than what that person has. So we often go to influencers today on social media and stuff, who've just done like 5 minutes of reading and suddenly have 50,000 followers by saying something profound, but there's no substance behind them, you see? So tradition, when I just finished reading the Ramayana, the Kamala Subramaniam translation, it took me 6 months. It's a bridge version, right? So the original is over 100,000 verses, so beautiful. But look at how they learn there. They always have a reverence for teachers. When they meet a teacher, first they want to offer something, then they want to hear about their stories, and then, please, will you teach me this? And they'll sit there quietly and patiently to get it. I just grab a bottle of water. So tradition is very important. And today, the problem with today in modern times is you get a lot of charlatans as well. So a person in the ochre robe is not necessarily a wise person. And our ability to assess the teacher is not based on the outer appearance, because we're a very materialistic society, we're body attached. So if something looks good, we think it's good. But the ability to assess according to the intellect and the mind, which is a subtle capability, with that function we're completely lost. And you have to have some of that ability, you see. So that's very important. So that's Agami, tradition, right? And then there's so much on knowledge, I could spend a week talking on this slide alone. But the real knowledge is not knowledgeable. So what is the true knowledge we seek? So the reason I couldn't make it on the first day, and I apologize for that, is the timing of things. And when I arrived here, that was the first day of our Upanishad lectures at the academy. Now, you will say, yes, medical conference, the Upanishads, right? Now, Upanishad, sit below, study. That's the meaning of the word. Right? Upa, below, sit, study. Right? So you're sitting below someone that's higher. You're going to say, I don't know. When you say, I don't know, the cup is empty, you can get new knowledge. Sit means introvert. You've got no rajasic, extroverted tendencies. So you don't want to go sightseeing in Pune. I don't want to go to Mumbai to see some temples or cinema or anything. I want to sit. I'm introverted. I'm sitting there. And study is taking the knowledge. The Upanishads from India, I'll put it to you, are the highest thought the human intellect is capable of. You can't think of anything higher than that. So all other knowledge covers the entire realm of conditioned knowledge. We have knowledge of endocrinology, we have knowledge of psychiatry, knowledge of technology, knowledge of things, you see? But knowledge of the thing which gives you knowledge in itself is a very subtle concept. Makes sense? And the Upanishads take you to that periphery. And beyond that, you can't even imagine. In fact, what I study, and I'm not here to promote the school I'm at, but Vedanta belongs to everyone. It's not any particular knowledge. Veda means knowledge, Anta means end of or culmination. So Vedanta means end of knowledge, meaning the knowledge knowing which everything is known. So if we as practitioners, physicians, people who want to help others, can get closer to that knowledge, then you'll need less dependence on conditioned knowledge. You'll walk into a room, and within 2 minutes of looking at a patient's face even, it happens, I've experienced it, you know exactly what the problems are. You know, you sit down, of course you've got to play the whole Shakespearean act and now listen to half an hour of the story and, you know, let them offload and all of it. It's called, what they call it, the word will come to me now. You're listening, but you know the solution. So you let them have their moment, and then in the end you just go into it. You know? And that's the cognitive capability you're capable of. But without that, what happens? You're dependent on props. So we need more tools, we need more measurements, we need 50,000 blood tests today, you need measurement stuff, and it's advancing the science. I'll talk about heart rate variability, which is a wonderful, useful tool. It's more subtler than blood pressure and cholesterol and sugar. It's getting closer to that inner part, you see? But it's still a gross tool. Subtle tools meaning you using your own intuitive capability. Does it make sense? Yeah? You're okay? So that's just a bit of knowledge. And please tell me when I'm getting close to running out of time, right? All right, so this is science, the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of structure and behavior of the physical and natural worlds, right? So I use the word gross and subtle. Gross doesn't mean ugly, it means more physical, more tangible. Now the body anatomy, I remember as a medical student, studying anatomy, I didn't like it. It was just facts you needed to study. But when it came to physiology, like a something subtler, you see, but it's still gross, it's chemical. It's tangible, it's measurable, right? And that was the limit. Medical science, medical school was body and physiology. Actually, they didn't even tap into the mind. And I'll challenge some of the thinking in all the meetings I go to. I spoke to 200 psychiatrists 2 weeks ago. So where's the mind? Is it in the brain? Right? The brain is a gross structure. And in philosophy, the brain and its neurochemistry is an artistic representation of the mind. It's the gross representation of the mind. You see? So you can manipulate the brain, but you're not going to change the mind. You temporarily subdue the mind. So I'll get into that in a second. But what I'm saying here, the point is science It's like you look through a telescope, you can see everything except your own eye. So that's what we're doing with science today, you see. That's why we need philosophy. Philosophy is the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, the thing that precedes your ability to know, reality, existence. This is a lover of wisdom. And every human's a lover of wisdom, actually, just not tapped into it. We are the chef d'oeuvre, the French say, the masterpiece of creation or evolution. We're the only species that can ask the question, beyond this world, where I had a nice paneer lunch and noodles, and a glass of water, and I traveled to Pune, and sightseeing and working, and beyond that terrestrial world, is there something more? The human is the only species that can ask that question. Pursuing that answer makes you a truly religious person, a yogi, a seeker, whatever you want to call it. You see, even an atheist, he says, I don't believe in God, right? Because I can say, as I'm saying, I don't know what God is. It can't, my senses can't go there, it precedes the senses, right? The atheist says, I've used my intellect to measure everything in science, in the universe, and there is no God. But he's making a fundamental mistake, because the intellect which he uses is dependent on that very concept and cannot reach that. You see? But he is in a way spiritual because he's investigated it and his intellect has decided there's nothing. But his intellect can't be correct because it's a limited tool. You see what I'm saying? So it's very interesting when you look at it that way. And then a few more authors. Erwin Schrödinger was the master of quantum physics, right? Vedanta teaches that consciousness is singular. So this is often a mistake with Eastern stuff, and I see a lot of Indian liberals, Hindu liberals especially, saying the Vedas don't teach you quantum physics. Vedas don't teach you microbiology. It's true, they don't. Because the Vedas teach you about the highest form of thinking. It's going to knowledge in itself. So it won't teach you a particular knowledge system, but it will improve your thinking capability that when you go do your science, it will come alive. Watson and Crick, DNA. I mean, look, research the influence of Eastern philosophy. And Schrödinger, right? I mean, he couldn't do without this actually. When he went into the mountains, he would read the Vedas, do some other weird things. He would take pearls to close his ears so no noise would disturb him. And he would work on quantum physics in the mountains, you see? And then Niels Bohr, right? The Bohr model of the atom, electrons, protons, all of that. I go to the Upanishads to ask questions. These guys formulated their theories after their thinking capability was changed here. William James, a famous author, and his book on psychology, I'll try and remember the name for those of you in psychology and psychiatry. You should read it in terms of the different manifestations of mind. It's the Gifford lectures in the 1800s at University of Edinburgh. His lecture on psychiatry and psychology based on Vedic system is recorded there. These were seminal lectures, and they're available on the internet or the University of Edinburgh website. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the greatest German philosopher minds, right? What does he allude to? The solace of my life, the Upanishads, right? Do you see that? So you must remember that modern scientists who put their faith in these authors, like Schopenhauer, don't know about the Vedas. But these guys were influenced by the Vedas, right? So that's interesting. And one more that I don't have a slide on here. Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, and Walt Whitman. They are known as the three minds of America, the United States. In fact, their philosophies, Emerson's greatest work is called Illusions, right? Which is Vedas. He's saying the world is an illusion, really, at the end of the day. So Emerson was thought of as the Jnana Yogi, the intellectual yogi of America. Henry David Thoreau, the Raja Yogi. And Walt Whitman, the poet, was the Bhakti Yoga, the devotional element. And they were all connected to each other through Vedic philosophy, which Emerson's father was a student of, and he grew up with all those books around him. So that's the influence, very interesting. So with this little background here, with the way science is going, I want to put this question to you. Scientific knowledge is advancing at a rapid pace, all agree. We got AI, we got technology, we got science, and Elon Musk is putting rockets to Mars, including his personal car. Weird things he's doing, right? I don't know if that's real science though. I can't think of an Eastern sage that would think of putting a car into space, right? Floating. You know about Elon Musk and his car? He shot a rocket into space, but he left his car there. Space junk already, littering space. So I'm not saying he's a bad guy, I'm just saying there's a difference in thinking, you see. Now, are we getting healthier as scientific knowledge is advancing? If you thought, forget, now this is where you do, where there's smoke, there's fire, right? 1.9 billion people overweight and obesity, diabetes rates are skyrocketing, right? Number of pharmaceutical molecules has gone off the charts. In fact, there's a molecule for every known pathway now, and we're discovering more pathways, and we'll have a molecule. So milieu interior, homeostasis is going to become milieu exterior. Exterior, that's what's happening, right? And this is the point also. Western countries were the first to rush towards healthism. Jane Fonda with those socks doing aerobics videos with VHS in the past. Arnold Schwarzenegger, flexing his pectoral muscles, And they said low fat and then low sugar and this and that. But they're still unhealthier than ever. So the science of nutritionism doesn't make sense. I mean, logic says the cause is not relating to effect. You've heard the astute lecturers on nutrition here, Ayurvedic diets, the proportions, sattvic, tamasic, rajasic food, how you tailor it according to the minds, right? That system worked wonderfully. They never had these issues, isn't it? Right. So there's something we can bring. This is why this MBM workshop is so important. I said to Dr. Vaishali, I was inspired because it's not what we can get out of the current system, it's what we have to offer them. That's the important thing. We have to have the courage to do it actually, right? And then stress. Where's stress? Every patient, today they talk about stress in schools. Children are stressed. Oh, Western world is stressed. What is stress? Where is stress? Stress is the traffic coming here. You come to India, you must expect the worst driving I've seen on the planet. We joke in South Africa that using, the indicator light, indicate left and right, is an added optional in India. Seat belts is a like to have. Hooting is constant, right? So, no, but you see, if you have correct assessment, when I come to India, that's what I expect. So I relate to that traffic according to it. I surrendered. I WhatsApped you this morning, I planned my driver earlier, I looked at the rain and everything, I got here comfortably, no problem, with elbow room, you see? But if I don't make correct assessment, I will be stressed. So where's stress? Wrong assessment. It's internal. The trigger can be external, but it's all internal. And not knowing the inner personality of a human, the entire scientific world is putting stress as an external thing. You see what's happening in the West at the moment, cancel culture? You're responsible for my stress. Stop talking. Woke culture, they call it. I'm not judging it, I'm analyzing it. You see, get out of my space. Everybody wants their own perfect world. It's worrying. And that is nothing but a lack of dharmic knowledge. Without dharmic knowledge, see, gravity pulls you down. Automatic. You don't have to make an effort to learn negative behavior. It happens automatically, right? So to go against gravity, you need rocket fuel. And with great effort, you get to escape velocity, floating free. So life is like that. Without dharmic knowledge, the rocket fuel of dharmic knowledge, right, we're going to go down. That's Kali Yuga. We're in it right now, isn't it? It's one definition, no dharmic knowledge. So everything, illogic, bad health, darkness, climate change, we're seeing the omens are there. It's not magical, mystical thinking, it's analysis. I have a very scientific mind, but I can see it, you see. So the point is not knowing how to deal with stress. They make it external, you see. So you blame everything outside, and then you need societies upon societies and structures upon structures to solve that stress. Climate change. We wanted to create cars to make life easy. Now the same cars are responsible for global warming. You see what I'm saying? There's now meat-free food. That processed stuff that they're making. They're saying it's to save animals. But when you eat that stuff, what's going to happen? You're going to get health problems for sure. You see? But they have a sense of proportion. Nothing wrong with eating meat, nothing wrong with not eating meat. Where's your mind when you're eating it? You see? That's important. When your mind is right, there'll be sense of proportion. Everything in nature will fall into place. Does it make sense? Yeah. So stress, Richard Carlson said, is nothing more than today a socially acceptable form of mental disease. We've normalized it. Everybody is stressed. My children are stressing me, schoolwork is stressing me, homework is stressing me, husband is stressing me, wife is stressing me. Why you get married then? I have children. See, because the thought was, when I get that, I'll be happy. Isn't it? You get married, 2 months later, you look back and say, wait a minute. Okay, maybe we just need children to fill the household. We have the child, and 1 week later, napkins and sickness and snotty nose and feeding it, and who's going to take care of it? I need to go to work. See, the point is, happiness is difficult to find inside. It's impossible to find outside. Not wrong to have these things. It's our incorrect relationship with it, expectation that causes stress. You think it's going to give you happiness, right? You see, how many other desires are born? You say, I have a child, I'll be happy. And you have a child, you want a healthy child, so you need medical insurance and food. But then you don't know food yourself, so you give it the best. Right? You know, one guy was giving his grandson that time 1,000, 2,000 rupees to take his friends to the Oberoi every Saturday. Boy was only 12 years old and developed severe obesity and diabetes. I want to make him happy, it will make me happy. Indiscriminate, you see? So it's all regulation of the mind. So, if life has become stressful, and I've heard the word in our previous discussions earlier today, lifestyle. As doctors, how many of us, we're here for mind-body medicine, right? And then when patients are in front of us, or when we teach medical students, everyone, all the evidence-based journals say, diet and exercise, lifestyle, right? Pharmacotherapy. What do we emphasize? Pharmacotherapy, isn't it? Because lifestyle, we say just eat properly, exercise. So what is lifestyle? Anyone have a definition? We say lifestyle. In your notes, you'll write change lifestyle. What is lifestyle? You see? Anyone?
May you discipline your life?
Discipline. See, it's nice, but when we use the word discipline in modern times, there's almost a negative connotation. You got to suppress yourself. Discipline comes from disciple, an immense sense of proportion to do things with reverence. In today's world, there's this added negative connotation. A disciplined student goes to a teacher. So the point is, life is a series of experiences, right? Now, if you take one experience, there's two things happening. You, the subject, you are the subject, the personality is meeting the world, the object. So from my point of view, I'm the subject, I'm meeting this world here, right now. But from your point of view, you're the subject, this is the object, the rest of it, isn't it? Now, the world is not in your control, right? Nature is playing out its laws. We are humble students of those laws, physics laws, science laws, all of that, right? Lion's a lion, sheep is a sheep, right? You can't change its nature. You can't change other people. Everybody has their own nature. Vasanas, we call it, fragrance, right? So you can't change other people. And this object world, from a modern point of view, technologically, we are advancing it, correct? I'll show you the graph. So we've got push-button comforts, 5-star restaurants, hotels, spa baths, right? Everything is there. So if in this equation, life experience, health is going down, but object world is improved scientifically, technologically, then what is actually the problem? The subject, you, the personality, you see. So it means the problem in today's world is not the world in itself which we're trying to fix. The problem is us, the individual, which means we know very little about us. So scientists of the world, the technological scientists, measure the objective world through instruments and advanced it. The scientist of our inner personality in Eastern culture, it only exists, is called a sage or a yogi. Right? Japan and China had equivalents. The Tao Te Ching masters like Confucius and Lao Tzu and all of them. And that's why you'll see every Westerner with the most advanced, they have the greatest amount of material access that even Will Smith, he can buy 10 yachts tomorrow. Jada Pinkett is married to all of that. But after he slapped that poor comedian, right? You know the story?
Yeah.
Where did Will Smith go? Where did he disappear? All the money in the world, all that came to India. Hiding in India, right? Because he needs someone to help him rehabilitate himself. Every Westerner is looking for a piece of this wisdom. If they don't know to access it here, where do they access it? In the guys that have extracted the active ingredient and made it a business, Deepak Chopra, and all these other self-help gurus like Stephen Covey. I'm not saying they're bad guys, right? But they're not the original sage. Because remember, even spiritual wisdom can be a big trap. You can capitalize on it. You have to be careful with that. The sages of yore never expected anything from anyone, right? You went with, they called it faggots, F-A-G-G-O-T-S, dry wood to give to the teacher for fire. And that was more than enough. You see what I'm saying? Huh? There's a difference in taking knowledge. You're all okay? So let's go into the subject of it, right? This is the whole point of philosophy. And I just want to make the point that when the individual, the subject is stressed, there's evidence. This is what the study done in women. There's perceived stress at the center. What happens? Physical activity out the window. No time. Diet quality gets worse. End product, BMI goes up. We go to negative behaviors when we stress. Why? Because if you don't know how to activate that internal gyro to stabilize yourself, you need an outer crutch. So it will be a glass of wine, a cigarette, some drugs. Food is the easiest because food doesn't get judged. Food is easily accessible. The community is not going to say, hey, he's a drug addict. You see? That's where stigma with obesity is coming from. It's kind of like a stigma for drug abusers, isn't it? You see, but you got to understand that these patients, and that's the empathy comes in, the mind is rattled. You're not feeling fulfilled, paripurna. So our job is not to give them the external crutch, breathing exercise, some pharmacotherapy, prescriptions, temporarily. But when the crutch is there, you got to strengthen the broken leg so you can become self-sufficient. And that's real MBM, is to develop that internal gyro that it holds that mind stable. That's the goal. And we're far from it. Today it's very difficult because we've fallen so far. So that's where you even get hypertension, because the stress response, what does it do? Adrenaline, cortisol, noradrenaline, hyperactivated, right? Endothelial remodeling, vascular structure changes, there's hypertension there. Make sense? Right. So end of the day, there's diabetes, there's obesity, and there's the issues there. And that's the direct effect of stress. Stress is a mental agitation due to unfulfilled desires. Remember that statement, because you can apply it, right? This is in Nature Endocrine Reviews, and if you want, I'll share the slides with you, so if it's not coming out clear on your camera. So this is it, and look how much more is going to come when we look at stress. The signs of stress I can predict with accuracy. Is going to show you stress is at the root of most modern diseases, even what we think are purely biologically driven. In rheumatology, you're going to see the immune system and impact of stress on it. All autoimmune. I mean, the rheumatologist down my corridor at my hospital is sending me more and more patients now. They're all on biologicals, but they're not getting better. And then she says, Ruda, they come to you, and then they're just peaceful and they forgot the joint pain. And it's nothing special. It's just us learning the ability to get them to cognize something inner. And the technical ability is through language and teaching, actually, through your own self-development. Very important. So, I'm giving you stress, I've given you where the problem is, it's with the subject. So we go into the subject a little deeper. And the anatomy of a human needs to be known. Now, I'll leave this for a second. Self is capital S-E-L-F. It is the ultimate, the infinite. You can call it by different names. God, Allah, Bhagwan, Father, right? Different religions. It is that thing that we're not going to cognize. But we have this feeling that there's something more. That's that investigation, isn't it? Right? And we say life is made up of spirit and matter. This bulb is shining, but the bulb's not shining of its own accord. What's in it?
Electricity.
Electricity. That speaker is giving off sound of its own accord. Electricity, right? Electricity in this thing is cooling me here. I mean, the cooler is cooling me, but there's electricity. Now, if I ask you to define the air conditioner, you can define it. Square structure with these vents blowing air. speaker is black, rectangular, cubic, right? Bulb is giving so many watts of light. But if I ask you to describe electricity, it's one in the same in everything. So the idea is that all life is enlivened by a spirit. You see, we don't know what that is. That's the goal of life. And that is that. Now, ignorance of that. See, if I say you're infinitely full, can you understand infinite? You can't. What is infinite? Where's the beginning? Where's the end? Now, that kind of fullness, that kind of happiness, infinite happiness, is what the masters are arguing we are capable of achieving. We are that. But we don't know that. So if you don't know something, then you're less of that, isn't it? And the minute you're less of that, that familiarity wants you to go back to that fullness. If you don't know how to go back, you're going to go the other way trying to get the fullness, into the terrestrial world, not the transcendental. So vasanas are born out of that ignorance, the fragrance of your life. Each one of us a particular pattern, and you're expressing that. And that gives rise to the body, the mind, and the intellect. You see? So the human subject, BMI, you got body mass index, now you got body, mind, intellect. The body is what you're seeing here. There's organs of action, the actor in me. And what can I use to act? My limbs and my tongue, speech and movement. You see that? That's all. That's voluntary, right? Senses go through the ears, eyes, nose, skin, taste. Isn't it? So constantly I'm receiving the sensory visiting of the objective world. It's coming into me, lands on the mind. You see? There's a reaction in the mind, and I'll show it to you. And then the body acts accordingly. You see that? Right. So mind is seat of emotions. It's a subtler concept in the body. It's the original pattern of thoughts you're born with. And you'll see, those of you that have more than one child, same house, same family, same parents, same food, same grandparents, right? Hopefully. In modern times, I don't know. Yeah. So, but within 2 weeks of them being born, different times, you can see there's a different nature to them, isn't it? Right. One gravitates early to cars, one to numbers, one to nature, one just wants dolls, right? What is that? There's something inherent. Somewhere someone, had exhausted his vasanas for family, children, became a big businessman, but in the back of his mind, he wanted to be a Formula One racer. And then 82 years old, he passed away happily. What happened to the desire for Formula One? The body is gone back to soil. Desire, mind, and intellect is still there. It's in the ether. It's not merged into infinite. You're not desireless. You're not nirvana. Then somewhere a child is born near the Formula One circuit to parents of Italian descent. And that boy just wants to race. By a teenager, he's doing go-kart and he becomes a form. You see, vasanas, the debits and credits. That's the theory of reincarnation. Very interesting. Leave that for now. Well, the point is that's the seat of emotions. But the mind also takes in more emotions based on your exposures and patterns. You were talking about it, mirror neurons, Udana Shakti. The children learn by copying. Your instructions don't work. You ever wondered why when you're telling your child, do this, do that, they're not listening? In fact, they start reminding you of you. When you think your child is a terror, whatever trait you think is a terror in them, look at yourself. Because they've copied it. Think about it, it's very interesting. So first 8 years of life, the child's mind is learning through Udana Shakti. It's just absorbing like a dry sponge everything. So the best way to bring up good children is live the path yourself. If you're doing it correctly, they'll copy it. And then around 9 or 10, the second birth occurs. In old India, they would shave the heads of the kid, give a little tuft, desire, and that's where the buddhi, intellect, forebrain is born. And that's where they get the vidya, or the knowledge of how to develop that logical capacity, which is the gross and subtle intellect, the thinker in us. You see, so the gross intellect can monitor the mind and change actions from the perception that comes in. You see that? And this needs to be developed through scriptural knowledge. The other subtle intellect is there in all of us, but it is veiled by our rajas and thoughts. When you have a lot of desires for the world and sensory gratification, the subtle intellect is clouded. So we were just talking earlier, the subtle intellect is that which can contemplate something higher than the world, the reality. And it's not that it needs to be developed, but once it's clear, you'll see those people, they just say, they hear something philosophical and they want to know more. They just want to go towards that. You know? And they hear Shah Rukh Khan got a new movie out, they switch off and go other direction. Whereas the emotional person, Shah Rukh Khan movie, I'm there, I'm booking the tickets now, even though it's being released in 6 months. Right? You see the difference? Right. So you understand these components. And what I'm saying is modern medicine is short on this part here, the intellect part. You see, we're learning about the mind still, but we're very heavy on this part here. You see, and that's why the picture is not complete. So intellect is subtler than the mind. Mind is subtler than the body. Body is gross, physical. Mind is subtler. Intellect is even subtler. But all of them are material, actually. You see, because only self-infinite is immaterial. You see? So we got to understand this, right? Now, the 3 conditions of the mind. If the mind is left ungoverned by the intellect, it's restless, topsy-turvy. Do you see that? And as you stabilize it, it's a little more imperfect mind. But you see, here's an example. I have a professor back home, he's a lovely chap. He's well published, one of the doyens on lipidology. In fact, familial hypercholesterolemia is foremost in the world. And I used to help him run his FH clinic there. Every day he used to come into my office, Sundeep, publication. Sundeep, you got another public. And he used to love the name and fame from it, you know. He says, I'm almost at 200 publications, you know. So scientifically, very stable. But emotionally, my God, he used to drive me up the pole, right? Because the other professor and him were at arms. The other professor was a comedian. So he used to agitate him. He used to book the clinic, he'd put 5 extra patients for that prof. Because he only wanted to be in the lab, he didn't want to be in the clinic, you see. So he used to book 5 extra there. So he'd see them, and he'd come, he'd say, excuse my language, but I'm just translating what, that bloody guy, he comes into my office, you know. And I like both of them, so I'm neutral party. Okay, he comes emotional, he rants, he raves, he swears, what must I do? And Prof, don't worry, it will be okay. The other guy comes in smiling, he says, hey, did he come cry, right? So, I said, yeah, I had a good laugh. You know, what do you do? So I'm saying, even though intelligently he was excellent in lipidology, his mind was imperfect. He was emotionally easily rattled, you see. But the perfect mind, winter comes, you feel the cold, you're not affected. Summer comes, you feel the heat, you're not affected. It doesn't mean you don't feel. You see other people suffering, there's a great empathy, but you're not affected by it. That's the difference. You see, people think being in a spiritual path, why these guys don't care. They care more than anyone, but they know how to help through objectivity. Weak pity was a word that came up somewhere earlier, we were talking. Weak pity is everything is shame. Shame. You know, give everything. You finish yourself up, you'll get into death like that. You see? So objectivity is to know how to help, what to help, how much to give within your means and all of that. You see, this is important to know. Because the liberal world is now saying everything is weak, just give, and every structure must support. I mean, you see how medicine becomes so difficult. How much do we need just to sustain one patient? Becoming very tough, and the paperwork that goes with that, my God, it's crazy. The stress is mental agitation created by unfulfilled desires. So let's go into that a bit. So when you go into the mind now, right? Vasana is the root. I was born with vasanas to read books. So I remember when I was 5 years old, my mother and families and community were saying, hey, why aren't you sporty, man? Why aren't you playing, in South Africa they play rugby. Those guys are the size of houses. A small guy like me, introverted Indian nerd, is going to play rugby. It'll break my bones into a pulp. But where you'd find me always is in the library. You see what I'm saying? So my vasanas are reading. That's what I was born with. My brother is younger than me, but he's sporty. He's bulkier and muscular and cameraman. And so that's his nature. You see, so that's vasana. Vasanas become your thoughts. I've had thoughts of, I used to read books on Christ and Buddha and everybody. Amar Chitrakata, backwards, forwards, 10 times over, right? So that's vasana. Everybody has different mind. That's your fragrance. That you are that flower, you must express it. So those become your thoughts of life. Those thoughts make your worldview. No two people here have the same worldview. You see that? And that becomes your desires in life. You see that? And you cannot have an action without a preceding desire. You see? So a lot of modern medicine is don't eat this, don't do that. You're forcing it on the action level. But you've got to look at the nature of this person's action. You see? And this is where we get to sattva, rajas, and tamasic minds. It's the only school of thought that contributed this knowledge, the mental temperaments, is Indian sciences, the Vedic sciences. Rajas, sattva, and tamas. You won't get it anywhere else. In fact, German professors that I know are studying this and compiling the traits based on sattva, rajas, and tamas at the moment. You see? So then if you can understand the mental texture, your prescriptions, for someone who's passionate, they need to do something. So it's more karma yoga prescription. They need some action with the service orientation. The introvert just needs some reading material. The tamasic guy, you got trouble. Right? It's like, you can't expect a baby to be born before 9 months. It's going to sit there. When it's ready, it will come out. You see? Unless you induce pain. So Hatha Yoga was to induce pain in tamasic people, to get them to rajas. From rajas, you can go to sattva. You know some of these words, I'll go through it. The point is, though, if the human doesn't have his intellect monitoring the thoughts and desires of the original vasanas, they're going to acquire more thoughts and desires during their life. So actually, instead of reducing thoughts and desires, which is the goal of human life, you're increasing them. You add on. Now I must go on 5-star holidays, I'm going to retire in Mauritius on the beach and get a tan. Weirdest thing ever, you know? Nobody retires happily, by the way. Check it with your patients, test it. Even the billionaires, they don't retire happily, right? So you have to develop the intellect to manage the mind. And mind, as I said, in philosophical parlance, is not the brain. It's subtle. If you say my mind, you say your mind, where's that space? Carl Jung collected collective unconscious. You see, his thoughts are bubbling in the universe. Atman is one without the other, so it's the God mind actually. Ignorance of the original infinite. Very interesting. Other thing about action is not what we do, is why we do it. What's happening in the mind when we do it. So I can be a doctor sitting in my office seeing 50 patients a day. Actually, let me give you a true story. A psychiatrist came to see me, right? So already there's like a blind man going to see an elephant, right? The blind person sees that, we can't, right? The psychiatrist comes to see me, he says, so people back home call me either Ruda or Sundeep, son. So I say, Ruda, he's smoking a cigarette, right? I say, what's wrong, man? He says, I'm stressed. I said, yeah, if you're stressed, psychiatrist, how are you going to help these chaps now? You know, it was COVID time. He says, no man, help me out now. I said, what's the problem? He says, I haven't seen my 40 patients today. I said, that's okay, it's quiet time. He says, no man, but I got bills to pay. I said, what bills? He says, before COVID, I bought a Jaguar. I bought so many crore house because my wife wanted a bigger house. Now I need to, he bought it all on loan, isn't it? So his desire for those objects without regulation, he bought outside of his means. Do you see that? So indiscriminate action. Intellect was not available. When intellect is not available to monitor the mind when you're making a decision, when it does become available, like it did in my office with this guy, you get regret. So regret is lack of availability of intellect which becomes available later. So now his desire to see patients is not to help them, is to make money. It's selfish. And the minute the desire is selfish, if it's not fulfilled, what did I say? Stress is nothing but unfulfilled desire. So his desire to make that much of money from his patients is unfulfilled, he's agitated, and he's smoking. You see that? Simple example. Now test this with every patient you meet. There's some desire that's unfulfilled. And the desire is unfulfilled because it was not intellectually governed initially, and there's probably some degree of selfishness in it. Which does not mean you must go tell your patients they're selfish. That art is very tricky. So you got to do by suggestion and story, you know. I use the psychiatrist story all the time now. You see what I'm saying? So he's worrying. So why did I give him advice? I said, you know what? You're going to have to bite the bullet with the wife, sell the Jaguar, get a cheaper car, and get a smaller house. You do fine. You don't need the bigger house, you see. And he said, actually, you're right. He put the cigarette down, you know. Whole office, I don't allow people to smoke. But he was a friend and smelled the place up instead of, right? Okay. You guys okay?
Yes.
How are we doing for time?
Yeah, we have lot of-
So this is very important. 3 types of action, and it is in our Vedas, right? You'll see. Even the highest guy, like Ravana in the Ramayana, he's a high soul. He wasn't some mediocre person. He's not just evil. His one wrong move was what? He just had the thought that he wants to acquire Sita. Selfish. You see that? But every other aspect of him was very high. He didn't even like voluntarily push himself on her. He kept coercing her, trying to sway her. Today they just coerce physically. I mean, that's why we see physical violence, gender-based violence today, isn't it? There's no dharma. So one selfish thought propelled by egocentric desire, one wrong move, you finished. You see that? Higher than selfish is unselfish. Where you try to go through life wanting to help. I've been given certain skills, I want to enhance them, and I'm going to help. There's a fair exchange, you'll get your reward, right? But at the end of the day, you're not saying, I'm doing this because I want something. It's truly. And when you do this, your desires will reduce. That's karma yoga. So karma yoga, the yoga of action, is to do things in the world. But the only difference between how the world is doing it today versus how it was ordained by Dharma is you do it unselfishly. You see, Stanford University, all the big universities, even in South Africa now, every medical student is being pushed to pass to promote their own career. My career, my PhD. You see on Twitter and social media, Dr. So-and-so PhD, I'm not saying it's wrong to advertise it for whatever purpose, but we value that. Because me, the other day I was going on the plane and the hostess took the ticket of the person in front of me and said, welcome on board, Sarah. And the lady lost the plot, she got angry. Just to the hostess, excuse me, read my name correctly. It's Dr. Sarah so-and-so. And she said, I didn't get a PhD for nothing. You should call me, see, ego, right? So point is, yeah, we got our titles, we got all of that, fine. But at the end of the day, it's the work that you must remove that selfish stigma. And all the universities, it's a big problem where I teach at the medical school. Try to teach these medical students. Your exams, you're anxious and the armpits are sweating and they're shaking and trembling. Why? Because they result orientated on themselves. But when I tell them, in your exam, just think about that patient suffering and tell me how you're going to help them. Anxiety is gone. You see, simple tool, right? All the corporates you treat, the CEOs and all of them, why they stressed, why they burnt out? Result orientation, name and fame. Maybe the big guy, Hollywood stars, they rise like a sparkler, they burn out even quicker like fireworks. No? You see that? Very interesting. The highest form, which is the state we're trying to achieve, the Krishna state, the Buddha state, the Christ state, Prophet Muhammad state, Zoroaster, Baha'u'llah, the Baha'i prophet, is selfless. And this we can't even understand. See, here there's a motive. I want to help. There's still a little bit there, motive. But here there's no motive. Khalil Gibran says, like the myrtle giving its fragrance yonder into the valley. You just give and you don't know where it goes. Nothing, no motive. This is like a rose giving a fragrance to everyone that walks by. That is the true giver. That's the true human. That's the perfect human. And that's what we must try to achieve. See, Krishna was a what? Politician, a child, a mischievous one at that. He was a son, a nephew, a husband to quite a few wives, a boyfriend, he was a warrior. He fought as well, a poet, a musician. You see that? But no motive in anything that he did. He played the game like an actor in a play, Sakshi, but always with the higher goal. Everything he was doing was to get everybody closer to that infinite truth. And he put all those chess pieces in place. And even when he was gone, things were playing out to get people to infinite. And that is like solid guy. So there's 3 transactions, getting back to the mind. Guys, okay. Right, so receipt, sensory, we've been through that. Lands in the mind, creates a reaction. And that reaction is based on your desire pattern. If you got desires for Sachin Tendulkar and one-day international cricket, if I walk in here with free tickets for, what is that thing called? One-day IPL. See, I don't have vasanas for that, right? But if you do have vasanas for that or desires and I flash the tickets here, those that have the desires are going to have a positive reaction. Extrovert, they're going to come they'll jump me down, they'll hurt me for the ticket and they will go to the match. But if you have no desire for that, no reaction. That's the introvert. So the person with the least desires becomes the introvert, can sit quietly and take this knowledge, even eventually meditate. You see? So you have to understand this, that the work to do ultimately is on this monkey mind, Vanara mind. How did Hanuman get reeled in? Higher purpose, achieve Ram infinite, service to a higher ideal, unselfish, isn't it? And he kept getting knowledge from Rama, isn't it? So bhakti, karma, and jnana. You see that? So very interesting in these stories, there's a lot of knowledge that you extracted, right? And look what he was able to achieve when the mind was reeled in. The fickle monkey mind is reeled in. So any mind, what they're saying, even a Vanara mind, right, can be reined in. The potential is in us. Okay, God, this is a very important slide, I think. If you understand this. And then this reaction is based on the mental temperaments, right? So I'm just planting seeds. I mean, this it's taken me 13 years to even know this much. It keeps going. And that's the other thing about knowledge. You never reach the end. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. Right?
Absolutely.
True, right? So tamas, I think this is very important from a medical practitioner point of view. You see, if you expect a tamasic to listen to a talk like I'm giving right now, you're going to be stressed. Your desire is going to be unfulfilled. Right? So you tailor it. This is a talk I can give here to an august crowd like this. But back home in the pure scientific crowd, I'm very careful. I'll put maybe 5% philosophy, 95% GLP-1, GIP-1. You see what I'm saying? You must tailor it. And that's the point. A good teacher doesn't teach from his level. He goes down to the level the receiver's at. In fact, if you have to speak to a patient like you would a 5-year-old child, then you must do that. You know the art of storytelling. But tamas is this inertia, the mineral kingdom, stones. You see, there is movement within. The particles are vibrating, but there's indolence, inertia. And you see a lot of this in the obesity crisis. You see, and it's not a judgment on them. It's the nature of the mind. There's nothing moving there. So to get these guys to move, you need cognitive behavior therapy and institutes at the end of the day that will incite some activity. But that too, you must have a limited expectation. This is the majority of the world. The forensic Western Wall Streeters, passionate, go, 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 competition, productivity, stock market up, In fact, the stock market today is a reflection of the collective mind. It's completely all over the place. We use the word bipolar, isn't it? Friday everybody's happy for weekend, Monday everybody's sad. November happy, holidays are coming, January sad. Western world approach. You see, I'm not judging them, I'm saying they've created it. Why do they need coffee breaks and all of that? Mind. See, the thing that saps your energy the most, I've been giving lectures on burnout to doctors, is not physical problems. Yeah, you can treat thyroid and iron deficiency and B12 and all of that stuff. But when you've had an argument with your partner, just think, that lasted only 5 minutes, but it was a heated argument. How drained do you feel after that? For days. I mean, you think you're in the twilight zone, like, what hit me here? A volcano or something, you know? Meteor, right? Movement of the mind, which is subtle, saps your energy. And everybody in the Rajasic worry and anxiety. I did that wrong, anxiety of the result in the future, result orientation. So children, school exams, worry, anxiety, worry, anxiety. Children have tons of energy because they don't have that movement. They're in the moment. So they got bundles, they are normal. The adult of today has less energy and we're diagnosing them as hyperactive. Think about that. In America, ADHD is off the charts. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I just think the proportion, maybe we overdiagnose it. You've got to think about that, you see. So if you understand Rajas, this passion of the mind, this is a guy, you can't tell him to sit in 20-minute vipassana and all of that stuff, breathing. He can't, his mind is in a frenzy. So what does he need as a prescription? Within his field, some karma yoga. But the twist is that unselfish. So I tell these guys, listen, weekend, community work, NGO, and they'll come back and they'll say, you know, the weekend was great. I did so much work. You know, gardening, helping build shacks and houses, but I never felt tired. Now, if you can apply the same philosophy in your company, my company doesn't exist to make money for us, to serve this country. You see with Modi and the politicians here, they're trying to improve that sense of nationalism, patriotism. When you work for a higher ideal, you become less unselfish. And that reduces your frenzy. So then you offload desires. This guy here will really be your patient. The sattvic guy. You see, he'll have some medical ailment. He'll say, come, give me the thing, patch it, carry on. He'll follow your advice to the T. You see, these are very rare individuals. Right? But no human is an absolute one of these. We are all proportions. So it could be 40% tamas, 20% rajas. Actually, it won't work because when you're very sattvic, there's very little tamas in you. You see, sattvic is poised, mature, the mind is stable, intellect is very powerful, contemplating the higher, living the terrestrial. You see, and this here, I think, is the key to good mind-body medicine in the future. That we should study it, we should learn its practical application, we should learn to identify it in ourselves is the best way to learn it. And then you do an analysis of your personality and say, right, how much of karma do I need, how much of... See, bhakti is for the devotional part and then intellect. You proportion it. And if you do that, your evolution in life will be great. If you do it randomly, evolution is slowed. Okay. And then this is a very interesting circadian physiology is showing us, and the scriptures have told us. Tamas is most active from 6 p.m. in the evening, nighttime. This is when people gamble, drink, all negative activities naturally. If you tell a guy 4 o'clock in the morning, let's have a drink, alcohol. He can't, even the alcoholic, he'll say, no, let's have a sundowner. Isn't it? It's like automatic, isn't it? So, Rajas is from 6 to 6. And as I see a lot of lawyers and corporates, they come, they say, I want to lose weight, I'm going to gym at 5 a.m. Wrong time. You see, 6 to 6 is the time for physical activity. Circadian physiology has shown this, right? Dr. Vaishali, genetic clocks, everything is there now. And Sattva is most active 4 to 6 a.m. So if you want to capitalize, you should study this kind of knowledge between 4 and 6. You enhance the intellect for the whole day. Then you go do your karma yoga, your exercise and all of that. Evening you go devotional a bit, some music and soften. 9:30, 10 later you're in bed. You get 6 to 8 hours, you're in rhythm. And you're in rhythm with the solar cycle, Surya Namaskar. Right? All the energies will align with you. Swami Ramatirtha, one of the greatest thinkers of India, guys probably haven't even heard of his books because he didn't publish, was a professor of mathematics, became self-realized in his teens, and then he only lived to the young age of 32. And he says, when you exercise, even there, why does exercise sometimes not work? Because when they're exercising, they're thinking, when am I going to get the six-pack? When am I going to get those Ritik Roshan abs? And selfish intent. But when you just do exercise for exercise's sake, that your body does not become an impediment to your higher seeking, and you align your mind to the action of life, the earth is moving, the sun is moving, the planets are that rhythm, then the exercise is effective. That's why we said in obesity earlier, someone said, don't weigh yourself all the time, don't get result orientated. It impedes the whole action. Okay, so we're getting to the end now. All good. A few more minutes. All right. Okay, so 6, 6, and 6. You see, anything scientific we discover in these spaces is only adding detail to this. It's not adding something new, actually. You see? And we need a bit of detail because what I said earlier is that the mind is so far gone today, there's so many varieties of minds, you need different avenues. In fact, the varieties in the Hindu systems in India is just an attestment to the wisdom of these great sages who saw this kind of mind needs this approach. This one will, Saraswati goddess will appeal, this type of ritual, for this one, that type of ritual. So all these manifestations are for the one goal, but appealing to different minds. You see? They were smart, these guys. They knew how to tailor it. So you go to work, you think of wealth, you can get greedy. But if you put a goddess Lakshmi, goddess of wealth, idol there, suddenly you get humble and say, sorry, you giving me the wealth, I'm not the creator of wealth. You remember the stories of her. You see, Saraswati, knowledge, I'm not the creator of knowledge. You see, that the idols are representing an ideal. They're not just there for, there was one infinite represented differently. You see that? Got it? Okay, so that's that. And then this is very important, I think. That I think, charity begins at home, it shouldn't end there. Today the world is very selfish. I don't mean that they're doing it intentionally, maliciously. But when you are attached just to you and yours, my children, you create separatism. Don't we put the names of our children on the bedroom door these days? Kartik's room. Right? What are you doing? You're saying this is yours. You're creating a boundary. So what are you doing? You're fertilizing the ego mind. Mine, separatism. You see? But you want to see the electricity in everything. How are you going to do that if you put a boundary, isn't it? You want to see the spirit. So here in India, you see tolerance like you've never seen anywhere in the world. Trust me, I come from a country with a lot of race issues. Mahatma Gandhi came from there as well. I mean, he jumped from here to there and came back, right? And the point is, this country is true democracy, not because of democratic principles, but because of these ideals at the end of the day. It exists here. So the minute you start thinking, you see the brahmacharya, the grihastha, the vanaprastha, and then the sannyasi, right? So the householder was not just a householder for his family, he was a community man. He was a lawyer for the community, you see, he was a doctor for the community. So they would work for that. And if each guy in his community did good work, that helped the country, the whole of humanity. And ultimately you identify with entire living beings. When you get there, there's no force. Like if you identify with, identification is love, it's true love. There's no objective possession there, my child. You see, every child is your child. You're not going to put every child through university, you will break your bank balance. But the point is, you have that feeling for them. You see, and you do your duty to the ones you chose to have. That's it. You see, Krishna could go play at any house in the village, and they're all his mothers. And they all got just as irritated at his mischievous ways. You see, but they all loved him just as much, isn't it? Right. So that's entire living beings. And this is something we need in medicine, amongst us as healthcare professionals, and to infuse the idea to our patients. Right. And this is not just me saying it or the Vedic scientists saying it. This is William Osler, who quoted Plato. There's two philosophers. Now, William Osler was a great physician. His house had a medical library where students could come anytime, even when he wasn't around, and books were just available. And he said, on account of the intimate personal nature of his work, the medical man, perhaps more than any other man, needs higher education, of which Plato speaks. That education in virtue from youth upwards, which enables a man eagerly to pursue the ideal perfection. Ideal perfection is self, but the steps must go. So these guys were saying the same thing. And then subsequent to Plato, and then we took the Hippocratic Oath, and I don't know what that's become today. You see the new oath in America, it's completely like a caricature of the original, you know? It all appeals to ego only. So in keeping with the principles of these higher values, these higher values that we need to infuse into our work is gratitude. Not thank you, that false thank you all the time, you know? It's an awareness that so many things had to come together for me to give this talk even. Dr. Vaishali and the team, the sound engineers, the finances that went into it. But even just to speak this, I have a teacher, isn't it? And he's been grilling us for years and he said, you still don't understand, right? So, you know, who gives? Nobody. Gratitude is the awareness, the constant awareness of the divinity that shapes our end. Giving, not taking. Meaning, don't give everything away. I mean, but that attitude of you first. See, India's traffic problem will be solved in a minute. Just you first. You get to the intersection, the circle, just go, then I'll go. You see, you'll see it will be solved, right? That'll happen. I'm not here to comment about India. Anyways, a lot of sightseeing for me, traffic slows. Duty is not rights. You have a right to eat candy, there's no problem. But you have a duty to look after your health. So the diabetic patient will say, hey, I have a duty to look after my body that it does not become a burden to my family. So it's my right to eat this candy, but my duty to maybe refuse it for this moment. Liberal life, everything is my right. We see it in my country as well. My right to do this, my right, I want this, I want that. So we must bring this concept back. Objectivity is to see things as they are, not as we like them to be. We have a worldview, that's fine, but your worldview is not my worldview. So you see my worldview as it is and you relate to me accordingly, I relate to you. You see a lion in the game park, you don't go and pet it and cuddle it. You sit in your car, you watch it from far, and even though it kills a creature, you say beautiful, isn't it? So it's vicious, but it's beautiful and you love it because you've related to it correctly by its nature. You relate to other humans according to their mental temperaments. This is the key. Every human is different. There's bunny rabbit humans, there's koala bear humans, there's lion humans, there's some snake humans and all, right? There's quite a few out there, right? But they are what they are. You must learn to relate. You see, if you can't handle the snake human, stay far. Finish. Don't expect them to be count. You see? Objectivity. Set a direction in life. Today we're all over the place. You can't be an Instagram influencer and an endocrinologist and this and that and that. You know? There are certain obligatory duties, isn't it? If you choose to have a partner, you have an obligation to your partner and the family and your children. That's your choice. That's 20% of your time. Then you have your calling. Stick with it, according to your Vasana said. Know yourself. And work with consistency, concentration, and cooperation of the right things for that. Then you're effective. Today we dissipate too much energy in things that are non-essential. You don't have to go to every social that the extended family is having. You don't have to go to every wedding. One wedding can take 10 days. It's so exhausting, you know. Send a gift, say, okay, I've got work to do for the greater ideal, you know. That's what you got to do. We've gone a little bit lopsided with these things. And then the action I've already discussed, right? So I think these are very important. When you take a picture of that, then my job is done. These guys here, 27 years in prison, Nelson Mandela, never tilted, mind stable, higher ideal. He was educating the prisoners in the quarry where they were working. He maintained his diet in the prison cell. He came out looking handsome and lean and strong as ever. When he walked into parliament, nobody touched him. Today my parliament is like a zoo, right? Because there's no one with those values. They all have obesity, they're all sickly, they talk terribly, there's no virtues. You see, Mahatma Gandhi renounced everything. He brought down the British Empire that took over the whole world. And how did he do it? Huh? Fasting, walking, with local cotton, his clothes. Huh? How did he get to that simplicity and effectiveness? Stable mind, direction, higher ideal, knowledge. You see that? So, what are we capable of as humans? And these guys were not even self-realized fully. Imagine that Christ state. Forgive them, they know not what they do. They can crucify him, the mind is still stable inside. That's the message of crucifixion. You can get to that state. You are not the body, you are not the mind, you're not the intellect, you're the infinite self. Reach that, nothing can touch you. You see that? So, last final thoughts to put it in a diagrammatic way. Today we're focused on the physical body, which is just a vesture of minerals, 70% water, 30% elements of the periodic table. And we've got the science of nutrition to maintain the body. Right? Dr. Gita? Right? The vital air sheath is our physiology. In those days they had names for it, but this is where the science is today. GLP, GIP, gut-brain axis, right? Soon the kidney-brain. This is how diabetes went from hyperglycemia to cardioglycemia to cardio-renal, now cardio-renal metabolic. Next will be cardio-renal metabolic neuro, and then they're going to have the whole body again. So, vital air sheath. So a lot of the science. Now, maybe for this MBM, in the last few days, there was a lot of work done. So you see, when you measure heart rate variability, you're measuring something here actually, at the vital air sheath. But that heart rate variability is a reflection of the mental agitation. You see that? This is stress. So stress is experienced here. You can now measure it with heart rate variability there. Once you got that heart rate variability output, you can prescribe now for this vital air sheath through breathing, nutrition, etc., exercises that are going to stabilize this vital air sheath and give you better physical health. But while you're doing that, I'll put it to you, we need to develop this to make sure that mind doesn't slip again. Do you see that? The breathing exercises and stuff yoke the mind temporarily. It's like holding a bull by a rope temporarily, you see? And you feel calm for a month or a week or so. But you know from experience, all the patients tilt after a while. And what I'm putting to you is the need for philosophy is to work on this through these types of instructions and invitation to self-work. Then over time, intervention outside, inner work, you stabilize it. And then you're getting that human who won't need outer intervention. In fact, a truly successful doctor is one who runs out of business eventually. Right? Makes sense. So just for your reference, I think this is very helpful for the placement of all the beautiful subjects you've learned in the last few days, to have this in mind here, that this is where it works ultimately. Mental sheath, intellectual sheath. Bliss sheath is experienced when you're sleeping, deep sleep, no dreams. You see that? That's called deep sleep. This vast quietness. You wake up, you say, I wish I could feel that while I was awake. Isn't it? But you were there observing that deep sleep, otherwise you wouldn't remember it. So who's that observer? at infinite. You see? So the aim of the game is use the intellect to reduce the desires of the mind. When the mind is stable, physiology is stable, body will reflect that. When the mind is non-existent, there's no intellect to monitor the mind. Intellect is gone, mind is gone. There's no body. The entire thing collapses into that. That's the concept of nirvana or self-realization. Very, very simply. Now, just 5 more minutes, sorry. I need to make this point here. And I'm not against meditation, don't get me wrong, right? But I just want to create some depth around the understanding of meditation. According to scripture, this is not my opinion, it's the Vedic laws that I've studied, which are fact in themselves. There can be unwanted effects of meditation according to the way the Western world is doing it at the moment. So you have to ask another question. There's so many apps for meditation, but are they calmer? Are the Westerners calmer? No, they're not. They're more energetic than ever. So the point is, meditation is defined as a mind directed to single-pointed thought by a very well-developed intellect. Which means, by the time you get to single-pointed thought, you as a human have to have offloaded, got rid of most of your thoughts and desires for the world. Makes sense? You can't be affected by your child's exam results when you're meditating. You're going there home, children at home. Isn't how the mind goes, right? And then you're gone. That's not meditation. What you're doing then is a temporary rest from your otherwise busier mind, relatively less. So you're going to feel better. And that's okay. Because remember when the Beatles came back from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the singers in the 60s, they came to the West and the media were there because the producer had died. And they said, how are you guys doing? They said, no, we're doing great, we're feeling peaceful. Why? Meditation. He taught us meditate. Now the Boston guys, Harvard and all of them heard about this. So they called Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and they said, let's examine this. Now he could meditate. And what they did, they put all the electrodes on him and they said, look at this, heart rate better, cholesterol better, BP better, right? But the Western mind is interested in body. So they're measuring BP, pulse, because they don't want a heart attack so that they can retire with all the money they want. That's not the purpose of meditation, you see. So they took the active ingredient and applied it at the physical level. And all these apps have developed around that. Whereas the threefold part, the fourfold, the fourth yoga is Hatha Yoga, I didn't put in, that's for the Tamasic. But the point is, according to your mental texture, if you prescribe the right interventions in proportion, this person is going to reduce their desires over time. They become a little bit standardized, simple in life. It's not a forced simplicity. That person becomes more withdrawn. So that's the guy when they say there's a big wedding the Ambanis are having and you invited. I say, no thank you. You see, makes sense. He's withdrawn. No desires. Then, no one here from the Ambanis, right? And when your mind is less desireful, you can concentrate. The intellect holds to your mind to the task at hand. No worry and anxiety. Your energy is good. You're effective in life. And then this guy can sit in meditation, single pointed, with the right posture, the right breathing. And he's got a single pointed thought there. Om, silence. Om, silence. But the mind still exists. There's one Om thought there. So self-realization, or real samadhi, or nirvana, whatever words we call it, but is the thoughtless state. You see, I want that back, sorry. I'll give you the slides. Sorry, man. Animation's slow. This evolution is slower. It takes time. You can't get this wrong. It may take many janmas even, but you've got to set the direction. The point is, if you're smart, you start playing. You know you're not going to get to self-realization, but you plan your next life. What are my last thoughts before I expire? And you're thinking, okay, I'm going to be born in a philosophical household, there's that. You pop up there, right? Okay. It's not as simple as that. So this here depicts it nicely. Intellect in meditation monitors the mind. Om, silence, Om, silence, Om, silence, right? Sorry, I should have made that faster. Now the point is, the minute you get to that point of silence, where even the Om thought falls away, right? what's going to happen is Om goes away, right? So for the intellect, the buddhi to exist, it needs a mind to monitor duality, tall and short. So here it's Om silence, Om silence, Om silence, right? But when that last thought is gone, you're thoughtless in silence, the intellect cannot exist, it becomes baffled. They call it the wonderment of enlightenment. It's describing something weird happens. It's like a psychedelic experience, they say. You've heard these things? Right. So end of the day, what happens then is the mind is gone. I didn't realize I made it that slow. And ultimately, there's no thought, there's no mind, there's no intellect, and there's actually no world then. That's your goal of life, right? So this is very heavy, it's very subtle. It's not something you want to talk to about your patient. I'm just giving it to this crowd to set that bar, to just plant a seed that there is more. And we need to try and achieve it. So at the end of the day, practical philosophy, to summarize it, is actually the development of the intellect. How do we do that? It's not intelligence, it's not book knowledge, it's through critical thinking. How you develop the intellect is by asking this question, is that so? Never take anything at face value. Everything the world is offering us, just ask, is that so? Is there a different way? Study these higher values, study a bit of the scripture because they give you the intelligence. Actually, Vedic knowledge is intelligence in itself, but it develops the intellect through critical thinking and questioning. It gives you a sounding board, a measurement stick. And that will help direct in medicine, in healthcare, in the world, a systemic change directed by higher values, fundamental restructuring of our direction as a species. It's a big message, this in a small room, but the world is not ready to hear it. Every one of you is an individual spark. When a candle lights 100 other candles, the candle itself is not less of a candle. The light remains the same. Each one of us here, someone asked, this knowledge is great for the world, but you give it to those that are desiring it. Don't force it on anyone, that's important. Your patients, you can talk to them to the level they are, because they've come to ask you for advice. That's not unsolicited advice. Never give unsolicited advice. Leave people alone, And that's it. The education of the heart, the moral side of man, must keep pace with the education of the head. Our fellow creatures cannot be dealt with as man deals in corn and co. We're not actuarial numbers on a page. We're not statistical significance on a page in evidence-based medicine. The human is the infinite, and we should treat it as such. That's the key message for this. I thank you for your time. This year, I've got more circles. Who asked circles last time? Remember we asked the question, why circles? So I got more for you. A square has 4 corners, right? It's a limited geometric structure, which the body is housed in here, right? So the body is a physical, limited structure. Now if I put 2 more or 4 more corners on the square, what does it become? Hexagon, right? If I had more corners, a more elaborate hexagon, whatever you call it, right? If I add infinite corners to a square, what does it become? A circle. So this Leonardo da Vinci was a smart guy. He had realized the truth and he was depicting his art. He's saying this limited physical body is housing an infinite principle. Same as the kosha wheel. You see that? Right. That penny dropped after last year's MBM workshop. He gave me a question and I reflected, and that finally came to my mind. I thank you for your time. If you have any questions, we'll take up.